We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake, 'cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up. We ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rebuttal and the Essequibo, the time on night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up. We ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake, 'cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up. We ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rebuttal and the Essequibo, the time on night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up. We ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not So we ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people, struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know, we gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here, and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere, make no mistake. Cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, the time on night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it, we have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people, struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one chorus, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know, we gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here, and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere, make no mistake. Cause we ain't giving up no mountain, giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river. That belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one rice, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, daytime or night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain. We ain't giving up. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up. We ain't giving up no river. We ain't giving up. That belongs to we. Not one blue sake. Not one rice grain. Not one rice. Not a blade of grass. So we ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river. That belongs to we. Not one blue sake. Not one rice grain. Not one chorus. Not a blade of grass. We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down.
Honorable members, I declare this 64th sitting of the National Assembly of the 12th Parliament of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana to be duly constituted and in session. The clerk will lead us in prayers.
Almighty God, we who are gathered together, we most humbly beseech thee to guide us in all our consultations, so that we may together build a land where knowledge is free, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, and where words come from the depth of truth. Grant us, O God, thy aid and guidance, so that we may deal justly with the several causes that come before us, laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and personal preferences, so that the result of our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion, the preservation of justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the President, and the peace and prosperity of Guyana. Grant us, O God, the vision so to lead, that all the people of this fair land may enter that state of brotherhood and unity, where the mind is led forward by thee, with ever-widening thought and action.
Please be seated.
Messages from the President. Announcements by the Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Good morning to everyone. Honorable members, this morning we are joined by former Minister Simona Brooms. Where is Minister? Ministers to the west of the dome and a member of her staff. I also would like to take this opportunity to wish the Honorable Member the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources, Mr. Vikram Bharat. A very happy birthday. Honorable members, this is May 2023, the first elections for Parliament of all Guyanese was held on the 27th of April 1953, just over 70 years ago. And on the 18th of May, which will be next Thursday, the first members of Parliament, including the Honorable
Members Dr. Chetty Jagan, Forrest Burnham, Janet Jagan, Jesse Burnham, Ashton Chase, took the oath of office. So next Thursday, officially, will commemorate 70 years since a Guyanese parliament has been established, and there are plans to have an appropriate function on that occasion. I just thought I'd alert you before we proceed to the business of the group. Mr. Clerk?
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers and reports, etc.
Honorable Chairperson of the Committee of Selection. Honorable Gator Shearer. Sorry. Honorable members, I present to the Assembly the minutes of the proceedings of the 12th meeting of the Committee of Selection, which was held on the 28th of April, 2023. Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to present to the Assembly the audited financial statements of the Integrity Commission for the years ending 31st December 2015 to 2019. The audited financial statements of the Public Police Service Commission for the years ended 31st December 2016, 2018, and 2020. The audited financial statements for the Protected Areas Commission for the year ended 31st December 2014. The audited financial statements of the Institute of Applied Science and Technology for the years ended 31st December 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Audited financial statements of the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission for the year ended 31st December 2016. Audited financial statements of the Environmental Protection Agency for the years ended 31st December 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. And thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Mr. Clerk?
Reports from committees. Oral questions without notice. Questions and notice.
Honorable members, there are. Honorable members, the Honorable Senior Minister of Finance in the Office of the President, with Dr. Ashley Singh, is not with us, and there are questions which have been deferred at the last sitting to this sitting. The relevant standing orders allow us to defer questions only for one sitting. I would have to now call on the Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance for the suspension of the Standing Order 2223 to allow for the relevant one, I can't remember the exact, 22.9, so that we can take those questions at the next sitting. Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I had, in relation to the oral questions to the Minister of Finance at the last sitting, I'd asked for a deferral. Regrettably, the Minister had to go overseas for an urgent meeting, which clashes with this. sitting. So I am asking you and the House to allow for the suspension of the standing orders, to allow, that's standing orders 22, subclause 9, to allow for the minister to have additional time to be able to present the answers or to respond to the oral questions that have been asked by the honorable members.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, I now put a question that Standing Order 22, subsection 9 be suspended to allow the Honorable Minister to address the oral questions without notice at the next sitting. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. Ayes have it. Honorable members, there are 8 questions on today's order paper. Questions 1, 2, and 3 are for written replies. Questions 4 to 8 are for oral replies. For the written replies, questions 1, 2, and 3 are in the name of the Honorable Member, Ms. Annette Ferguson. Questions 1 and 2 are for the Honorable Minister of Housing and Water, and question number 3 is for the Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance. The answers to all of these questions have been received and have therefore, in accordance with our standing orders, been circulated. Question 4, the Honorable Member, Mr. Ganesh Mahipur, you may ask your question. Sorry, that one is deferred. Ganesh, sorry about that. All the others are deferred, are for the Minister of Finance, sorry. Mr. Clerk? Sorry, Miss.
There is a question
number 7, the Honorable Member, Ms.
Honorable
Thank you,
Minister
Honorable Minister.
Colin Crowell.
Crowell.
He is not within reach. He's in the interior, and so he is asked to a deferral because he hasn't had one before, so this would be his first request for deferral. But also, Mr. Speaker, on looking at the question, it is asking for very detailed and a lot of detail. And we're asking if the question could be converted to a question for written answer, understanding Order 19C. If you look at it, it's asking for the names of the contractors who've been awarded contracts, a disaggregation of the project sum to each contractor and lots awarded to each contractor. And then they want the full dimension, width and depth of the road on completion, and what are the safety features. This, Mr. Speaker, in my mind, should have been a written question, and we're asking for it to be converted to a written question.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We do have a deferral, and we will ask the Honorable Member asking that question to take note so that we can decide before the next sitting and address this. Mr. Clerk?
Statements by ministers, including policy statements. Personal explanation.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand on standing order 19.5, and if you would allow me the opportunity to quote what this particular...
Go ahead.
A member who has given notice of a question for written answer may request that it be converted to a question for oral answer. Notice of such a request shall be given by the member in writing to the clerk not less than 7 clear days before the sitting day on which the answer is required. And I rise on this particular order, sir, in relation to the Honorable Gil Teixeira, right? So just allow me, sir, these questions were actually put by me, sir, right? Sorry, and if I can go on to 6, if in the opinion of the speaker, a question for oral answer is of such a nature as to require a lengthy reply, the Speaker may direct that such question be converted to a question for a written answer. So, Mr. Speaker, even though this standing order refers to you, I didn't hear you refer to Standing Order 6. So I wish to be guided. I wish to be guided, sir. Thank you.
Thank
So
you, Honourable Member.
It's not for the Honourable
Thank you,
Member
Honourable Member.
to ask.
Thank you, Honourable Member. All that the Honourable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance had asked is it's her view that it should have been a written one. That's her view, and that's what she put to me. I allowed it because I was of the view you could have asked it, but she made a request, and that's why I said to you, before the next sitting, we can discuss. So I think there is some amount of time that we can reach consensus on this without the Speaker having to direct. Thank you.
I just so want to say, Mr. Speaker, not to contradict you, but I did raise the issue under Standing Order 19.6, which is within your power to ask that the question be converted to written. So I'm not sure what we have to discuss, but I'm willing to discuss anything with you as usual, and of course with my honorable friend over there, Annette Ferguson.
In the almost 2 3/4 years, I have been at pains not to want to direct the over 200 odd questions that have been put to the chair, but rather to seek some consensus. And I'll give you a response.
Thank you very much. Oh, you'll give me a response?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, sir, I just need clarification from you.
Clarification is that we will discuss it if you ask it.
Okay, thank you very
orally,
much, sir.
then.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Clerk?
Statement by ministers including policy statements, personal explanations, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance.
Honorable members, I received on my email at just about 17 minutes after 7 last evening, a request by the Honorable Member, Mr. Ganesh Mahipal, to move a motion under this head for the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. And when I received it, I immediately referred to the rules and to the clerk. The honorable member sent that to me just after 7 o'clock last evening. But one of my news release, which I get in my inbox feed at 1 minute after 5 yesterday, which is 2 hours and 16 minutes before the Honorable Mahipal's motion, I received a news item that the Environmental Protection Agency had moved to court. I didn't know if it was yesterday or Monday, but I subsequently received the filings this morning that the EPA did move to court on Monday. So this matter is now in the courts and we will be able to deal with it. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Clerk?
Motions relating to the motions relating to the business, please, or sittings of the National Assembly and moved by Minister. Introduction of bills. Public business. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, the 2 financial papers that are listed, the Honorable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're asking that the 2 financial papers be deferred for the return of the Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashley Singh, who will be at the next sitting.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk?
Business.
Honorable members, we have a motion in the name of the Honorable Member, Mr. Ganesh Mahipal. The Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipal, you may proceed with moving your motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was seeking your attention a bit earlier to seek some clarity from you, please. So before I go into the motion, may I ask, sir, if the court matter that was filed concerning the EPA, can you say if a court date and judges were assigned to it? Because I do recall that in keeping with your previous ruling, sir, pertaining to sub judice, I remember you did make that case, sir, that a court date and also judges assigned to it is imperative of it being deemed sub judice. So, sir, may I seek your clarity on that, please?
Point of order, we are at the Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipal, will move the following motion. The Honorable Member, Mr. Ganesh Mahipal, you may proceed with your motion.
Thank you very much for the clarity, Mr. Speaker. As usual, you're very, very clear, and I think we understand clearly what is it that you're saying. And thank you very much for this opportunity to present to this National Assembly a motion that is standing in my name, where it seeks to basically provide a timeline in terms of members when they submit questions and motions to the National Assembly, and in order to get it on the order paper in what one can consider to be a timely manner. So it is a very simple motion in my view, Comrade Speaker, and I am not certain what is the executive side, the executive arm of government's side position on this motion, but permit me to just read the motion for the clarity of all. And it states, whereas questions and motions submitted by members of the National Assembly require approval from the Speaker of the National Assembly before the Clerk of the National Assembly prepares and circulate to members a notice paper. Be it resolved that Standing Order number 22 be removed and replaced with questions and motions submitted to the Clerk of the National Assembly must be submitted to the Speaker of the National Assembly within 4 days of receipt, who shall consider the questions and motions. Be it further resolved that Standing Order number 23 be inserted and now reads, if the Speaker is of the opinion that any question of which a member has given notice to the clerk, or which a member has sought permission to ask without notice, is an abuse of the rights of questioning or infringes any of the provisions of this or any other standing order, he or she may within 4 days direct that A, it be printed or ask with such alterations as he or she may direct, or B, that the member concerned be informed that the question is inadmissible. Be it further resolved that Standing Order number 27-2 be amended to now read, if the Speaker is of the opinion that any notice of motion which has been received by the Clerk of the National Assembly infringes the provision of any standing order or is in any other way out of order, he or she may within 4 days direct that the member concerned be informed that the notice of motion is out of order, or that the notice of motion be entered in the order book with such alterations as he or she may direct. Sir, it is a very, very simple motion, and it seeks to amend the standing order, as everyone present here will know, to basically provide a timeline of 4 days for the clerk and 4 days for the speaker to determine on questions and motions so that it can be placed on the order paper in a timely manner and be brought to this National Assembly for consideration. And with that, sir, I so move, and I hope it finds consensus in this Honorable House. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Mr. Mahipal. Honorable Member, Mr. Sanjeev Datta.
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Member, Mr. Datta.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to not support the motion by the Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipal. The motion, Mr. Speaker, in simple terms, seems to seek to put time limits on the clerk. When he receives a motion, he has 4 days, and he must send it to the Speaker. And that the motion seeks to also give the Speaker, yourself, 4 days within which to deal with it. The first and obvious query, Mr. Speaker, is why not 5? Or 6? Or 3? Or, Mr. Speaker, this came about when the Honorable Member was probably sitting on the imaginary SOPs in Congress Place having a cigarette. And by divine intervention, the number 4 came to him. And as a result, he wants to subject the entire nation to his numbers. But we remember the last time that the opposition sought to subject the nation to numbers. They couldn't add to 65. They couldn't divide what is the majority. But they come to the House to tell the Speaker that you should act within 4 days. They tell the clerk that you should act within 4 days. Mr. Speaker, we must understand the role of the Speaker. Erskine May, in his most recent edition, says, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, the role of the Speaker, the primary role of the Speaker is to preside over proceedings in the chambers and committees and the whole House. Also required is to pronounce on motions. Specifically, as this morning, the Speaker can disallow matters that are sub judice. He can disallow matters that he feels, in his own judgment, offends the standing order. Paragraph 4.49 of Erskine May. Now, Mr. Speaker, the role of the Speaker to pronounce on what happens in this Parliament requires deliberate judgment. But yet we have here the Honorable Member saying when that judgment should be made. It's as if, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member thinks that the clerk and the Speaker of this Assembly are simply waiting for frivolous motions which are filed by the Honorable Member to come to this House and they have nothing else to do. But what about deliberate judgment, Mr. Speaker? How is that to be exercised and made? How is the Speaker to research, to receive advice? How is the clerk to do that? What happens if this is filed the day before Good Friday? What do we mean by 4 days? Do we count weekends? Do we count holidays? Again, Mr. Speaker, the question is, how could one member come and decide, arbitrarily of course, that 4 days is sufficient? How could you decide that the matters in this House must be to the whim and fancy of the Honorable Member? Mr. Speaker, what astonishes me is that members of the honorable members of the House in the opposition come to this House and apparently speak as if history never existed. They speak in this House about wanting the high ideals and lofty goals of democracy, of transparency. They preach it now. Last year, the Honorable Attorney General passed in 1 year more legislation than was passed in the opposition for 5 years when they were in government. 1 year, the Honorable Attorney General did that. Mr. Speaker, we had the honorable member comes to this House and says that he wants things to move quickly so that there should be time limits. But when in the last government and the last speaker and motions were filed, no confidence motion was brought, the speaker in his own deliberation decided it could not be heard until the local government and the budget had been heard. Mr. Speaker, that is the Speaker's prerogative to decide on how to run the House. Recently, Your Honor, in Annette Ferguson litigation, the prorogation of Parliament, Mr. Ramjatan, is a power that exists. So exercise lawful powers. Don't speak of Russians. Don't speak of rigging. Don't try to rig and then come in this House and prepare as if you are holier than thou and you want the Parliament to function above board. You want transparency. Transparency means that you allow the Speaker and the clerk to do his job. That is what transparency means. Not that you fetter the discretion, tell them how to act, tell them when to act. Because God knows if you could have done that in 2020, where we would have been. Thankfully, you couldn't. He wouldn't allow you. But Mr. Speaker, again, I digress. Mr. Speaker, recently, 8 members of this House and the Honorable Member, Ms. Annette Ferguson, is in whose name the matter is reported. But the Honorable Member, Mr. Mahi Paul, was also a member to that. They were suspended by this House because they tried to interrupt the proceedings. They scrambled the mace. They wanted to stop you, Mr. Speaker, from conducting the proceedings. They wanted to stop the Honorable Member, Minister Mr. Ashney Singh, from speaking. Disrupted the entire Parliament. Mr. Speaker, these are the people who come to this House, honorable members, and say that they want the high and lofty ideals of democracy and transparency. And then they went to court to challenge the suspension by this House. And it was the right of the judge to tell you that she cannot interfere in the proceedings of this House, and that the determination of proceedings in this House is for this House alone. Another case, Mr. Speaker, it is not that the Guyanese people are litigious or we are any more litigious than anywhere else in the world. But we have had unique circumstances, Mr. Speaker, where apparently English language is treated as a foreign language here, where simple constitutional provisions could not be understood for what they mean. And we want to now change because the honorable member does not understand, Mr. Speaker. The standing orders is an entire framework. And in that framework, it provides what each actor must do. And does not understand that every public official must act with due alacrity. And the courts have said repeatedly, reasonableness is the guiding principle. Reasonableness should never, ever be interfered with. The discretion when a decision maker must act must be the discretion of that decision maker. You might not agree with it, but there could be more than one response that are all reasonable, and the decision maker is entitled to do so. Mr. Speaker, so we have a motion that seeks, on the face of it, to remove Standing Order 22 and replace it with questions and motions submitted to the clerk must be submitted to the Speaker of the National Assembly within 4 days. Now, Mr. Speaker, I am well aware the definition of days and the counting of time is provided for in every rule book and every set of rules. But, Mr. Speaker, we must also understand that when we put compulsory orders, we are fettering the discretion of the decision maker. Now, Mr. Speaker, so when we seek to set timelines that are so aggressive, Mr. Speaker, one cannot help but believe, understand that what is being sought is in fact to dictate to the decision maker by putting the pressure of such aggressive timelines. Now, we all know that deliberate consideration requires not only the decision maker coming to a decision, but the opportunity of the decision maker to receive advice if he wishes, to do research if he wishes, and to come to his own deliberate judgment. The imposition of 4 days is so aggressive that it smacks of dictatorship. It smacks of control. It smacks of removing of the discretion. This is what was happening. Now, Mr. Speaker, again, unbelievably so, the honorable members of the opposition who wanted to direct electoral officials what to do, who wanted to tell public officials what to do. The coercion of what was going on was unbelievable. You would not have thought that in a modern democracy in 2020 that could ever happen. But it happened before the eyes of the world. Even in the courts, it was unmistakable who were the lawyers representing the officials from GCOM who had an apparent attack that they couldn't read English. They couldn't understand maths. All of this, Mr. Speaker, and we have the members of the opposition coming to this House and trying to say that we believe in the lofty ideals of democracy and transparency. Mr. Speaker, the imposition of 4 days is really and truly an attempt at corruption, masquerading as transparency. That is what it is. Make no mistake, an aggressive timeline like 4 days is intended to put pressure on the decision maker, is intended to influence and intimidate the decision maker, and should never be countenanced in this House. The Speaker is independent. The Speaker is like a judge, the independent voice in this House. And the Speaker should never be muzzled. The Speaker and the clerk are the only things, Mr. Speaker, 5 years ago that stood between Guyana and the deep blue sea. It must stand always so that the nation must benefit from that. Mr. Speaker, everyone saw the no confidence motion. Everyone saw the attempts to have the vote suspended in the middle of the vote and have the votes retaken. We saw that, but thankfully a timeout was sought. But Mr. Speaker, thankfully, the Speaker stood his ground and he did what procedure and the rules dictated. The rules dictate, Mr. Speaker, that every member must file a motion to the clerk. It provides that the clerk must forward the motion to the Speaker. It provides that if the Speaker is of the opinion that there are any reason for the motion to be disallowed, or parts of the motion to be disallowed, that he is to so dictate. Mr. Speaker, today, we had an adjudication on a sub judice matter. This is the role and function of the Speaker. And every attempt to infringe upon that independent discretion or to fetter it must be resisted. It is not comparable, Mr. Speaker, to legislation that refer to judges and give 3 months and 6 months timeline. Those are not aggressive timelines. Those are not aggressive that you will say within 4 days. Within 4 days, Mr. Speaker, what about the other functions that the Speaker performs? What about the other duties of the clerk? Mr. Speaker, this motion is respectfully not worth the paper it is written on. It is a masquerade where the honorable member himself has decided for an entire nation that 4 days is enough. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member has not ventured to us a reason why 4 days was so appropriate. He has not suggested why 4 is better than 5. He's not suggested why not 14 days. He's not suggested what, of course, happens if the Speaker were to disregard him. What are we going to do, Mr. Speaker? The courts have no power over what goes on in this House. So again, you haven't thought it out very much if you cannot appreciate that when you make those rules, you must have some coercive power. And there is a reason why throughout the Commonwealth, in all the islands of the Caribbean and the United Kingdom, such stringent and aggressive timelines do not exist. And there is a reason. Well, you could speak when it is your turn. Again, English is a foreign language. We wouldn't hold our breath, but you're free to bring it up. But Mr. Speaker, when we go through it, we have to ask, why? Why is this necessary? And why is the honorable member so bent on 4 days? Mr. Speaker, well, if he's not bent on 4 days, he could have further amount of time as the House deems reasonable. But, Mr. Speaker, that's not what he said. He said 4 days, Mr. Ramchatan. 4 days is 4 days. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is one. No, they don't understand that time means time. They don't understand that rules, when you make them, you should obey them. They don't understand that when you hold an election and it says you must count from the SOPs, it means goddamn SOPs. Not spreadsheets, not bed sheets. But you didn't understand that either because you treat laws as guidelines, not binding in effect. You treat them as suppositions. Now, Mr. Speaker, they haven't paid me. So, but Mr. Speaker, we now come to the critical matter. Repeatedly we have in this House, Mr. Speaker, motions and behavior by the honorable members in the opposition, which are clearly outside the rules, which are disallowed. We even have situations in this House where the proceedings of this House are not to the liking of members of the opposition. So they bang on the tables, they march around in here, they steal the mace, they attack members of Parliament, they damage the systems. They do all of that, Mr. Speaker, because it's not to their liking. Mr. Speaker, the Speaker in those circumstances, according to Erskine, is empowered. He is the only person that is empowered to restore order. As we know, Mr. Speaker, our rules provide for suspension for the remainder of the sitting. It then provides for further suspension. The powers of the Speaker, Mr. Speaker, is so that he can conduct the affairs of this House in an orderly, civilized manner. To allow any interference or derogation from that right, Mr. Speaker, would be a travesty. Mr. Speaker, with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I do not support this motion. I reject it in its entirety. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, Mr. Datadin. And now for the Honorable Member, Mr. Peter Sarabu Hani.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to support the motion moved by my colleague, Honorable Ganesh Maipal, which seeks to amend Standing Orders 22, 23, and 27-2. Due to the content of the motion and what the motion is requesting of this Parliament, I believe that a debate on this issue needs to also be based in evidence and fact, along with the personal experiences we have faced while attempting to go through the current structure we have in place. It is also apt to note, Mr. Speaker, that though the standing orders are not renewed automatically, Parliament does have the ability to often peruse the standing orders and determine whether the current rules fit our circumstances or whether some changes are necessary. It must be noted that given the government's agenda and the massive growth in our GDP, the ability of the people's representatives to ask questions and receive timely responses to questions asked and motion filed is critical as questions and motions submitted by members of Parliament are critical tools for holding the government accountable and ensuring that the voices of our constituents are heard. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, while it is my personal belief that the proposed amendments are fair and should be supported by all, I thought it wise to do some investigation as to what pertains in these matters in other parliamentary jurisdictions. The question of just how long it takes for questions and motions to leave the desk of a member of Parliament, particularly an opposition MP, and reach the order paper is therefore a reasonable question, especially to ask in determining whether we are meeting the criteria of timeliness. Across the Commonwealth, different parliaments have developed different procedures for dealing with questions and motions. However, one common theme that emerges is the need for timely consideration of these important matters. Permit me, Mr. Speaker, to highlight what is done in the United Kingdom. The UK Standing Order states the following: notices of questions, motion amendments. Notices of questions shall be given by members in writing to the table office in a form determined by the Speaker. A notice of a question or of an amendment to a motion standing on the order paper for which no day has been fixed, or of the addition of a name in support of such a motion or amendment, which is given later than half an hour after the moment of interruption, shall be treated for all purposes as if it were a notice handed in after the rising of the House. A member shall indicate on the notice of any question whether it is for oral or written answer, and a member may indicate a date for answer of a question for written answer in accordance with paragraph 4 of this order. Where a member has indicated that a question is for written answer on a named day, the minister shall cause an answer to be given to the member on the date for which notice has been given, provided that a notice has appeared at latest on the notice paper circulated 2 days, excluding Saturday and Sunday, before that on which an answer is desired. And B, a member may not table more than 5 such questions on any one day. Notice of a question for oral answer may be given only for answer on the next day on which the member to whom it is addressed is due to give oral answers. What we're seeing here is that the member who is tabling the motion, the member who is, we will get to that. We will get to that, ma'am. So the member of Parliament who is requesting an answer to a question should be answered, and they have a time limit. They can't ask for a question to be answered before 2 days. So they have a timeline that is set there. And so anytime after 2 days, on a particular date, and that is put on the standing. So it is also necessary to note that in the UK, in addition to oral questions, there are 3 main types of written parliamentary questions. Ordinary questions that are in the House of Commons. Questions do not have to be answered on a specific date. An MP will date a written question for 2 days after they have been tabled. The convention is that the MP can expect it to be answered within 7 days of the question being tabled. Name day questions. The question specifies the date on which they should receive an answer. The MP must give a minimum of 2 days notice for these types of questions. MPs may not table more than 5 name day questions. Question time. Questions originally tabled for oral answer that do not get answered at oral question time are submitted to the government department as name day question and given written answers. The deadline for oral questions is 12:30 p.m., 3 sitting days before the question time takes place. For Northern Ireland, the deadline is 12:30 p.m., 5 sitting days before the question time takes place. A sitting day is a day when the House is meeting. So Mr. Speaker, I heard just now the honourable member speaking to the fact that the British Parliament meets a different way than we do meet, and we understand that. But that does not negate what is being done. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that even though they're meeting on a daily basis, that they have the ability to determine when they want questions answered. And so while it is that we say we are a parliamentary democracy, that we have to also look at what is happening in other parliamentary jurisdictions to determine what will best work in our country. 2 days, yes, 2 days. Mr. Speaker, India's standing orders reveal the following. The Secretariat gives at least 5 days notice to the minister concerned to answer a question. In practice, however, in order to give the concerned minister as much time as possible for the preparation of an answer, an advance copy of a question in the provisionally admitted form is forwarded to that ministry, online through email or in other modes. A member or a minister may move a motion for discussion on a matter of general public interest. But the notice of at least 5 days will normally be given to the concerned Parliament Secretariat under intimation to the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs for moving of that motion. If a notice of a motion is admitted by the Chairman and Speaker, it is put down in the list of business of the House concerned for the day on which its discussion is fixed. If, however, no day for its discussion has been fixed, it is notified in the bulletin as a no day yet named motion. So the person who is putting forward the motion can determine what day they would like that motion to be heard. And if they choose not to put a date, then it will go into that particular bracket and it will come up at a particular time on the agenda. In Canada, Mr. Speaker, the standing orders of the House of Commons specify strict timelines for the submission of questions and motions, with members required to submit their request at least 48 hours in advance of the sitting at which they wish to raise the issue. This allows the clerk to prepare the necessary documents and ensure that the Speaker and other members have sufficient time to consider the matter before it is raised. Canada's standing order specifically states, and I quote, 48 hours notice shall be given of a motion for leave to present a bill, resolution, or address for the appointment of any committee, for placing a question on the order paper, or for the consideration of any notice of motion pursuant to Standing Order 124. So, Mr. Speaker, what we have is that between England, Canada, and India, it's obvious that while they may meet more, what is part-time here in Guyana's context are the parliamentarians. The parliamentarians are on part-time, but as far as I'm aware, the Speaker is on full-time. And so if it is that we are looking at the fact that in the UK and Canada they meet daily, the Speaker as a full-time employee of Parliament has the ability to be able to be a...
I remember, I remember a correction. I just want you to point me to the standing orders where it says the Speaker is full-time.
Mr. Speaker, are you clarifying that the Speaker is also part-time?
As far as I know, speakers don't have 8 to 5 and...
No. Full-time doesn't mean 8 to 5.
I don't know. As far as I know, speakers have continued with their profession while...
Okay, so the Speaker is also... So what we're admitting to here is that our whole legislature is part-time, which I think we should also now go and look to whether or not that should remain the same in this 21st century. But we will get to that probably in another motion. So here in our own National Assembly, we have similar procedures in place. However, the proposed amendments to Standing Orders number 22.3 and 27.2 will further strengthen our procedures and help to ensure that questions and motions are dealt with in a timely and efficient manner. By requiring members to submit their questions and motions to the Speaker within 4 days of receipt, we can ensure that the Speaker has sufficient time to consider the matter and determine whether it is appropriate for discussion in the House. Similarly, by allowing the Speaker to direct that questions and motions be altered or deemed inadmissible if they infringe on any of the provisions of the standing orders, we can ensure that only the most relevant and appropriate questions and motions are discussed in the House. Mr. Speaker, I know there's a lot being said about what is happening in the House. A lot is being said about the fact that we are part-time. A lot is being said about what the Speaker should or should not be able to do. The reality is that the standing orders, for one, is not a permanent document, it's not written in stone. It has the ability for the Parliament and the National Assembly to determine whether changes can be made. And that is why we are here today discussing this particular motion. It does not have to deal with what happened in 2020, whether it's SOPs, 33, 34, whatever the case is. The reality is that the members of the opposition believe that a more timely response to the questions and motions is needed, especially with what we're dealing with today. And so that is what guided the motion, and that is why I am here at this particular moment standing and defending and would like to support this particular motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Now the Honourable Member, Ms. Catherine Hughes. Honourable Member, Ms. Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too want to stand in support of this motion, and I want to start again. We've heard a quote from Erskine May. I just want to set the stage with a different quote, and that is the classic definition of parliamentary privilege, which is found in Erskine May's treatise on the law, privileges, proceedings, and usage of Parliament. And I start the quote here. Parliamentary privilege is the sum of certain rights enjoyed by each House collectively and by members of each House individually, without which they could not discharge their functions. I want to repeat that part, without which they could not discharge their functions, and which exceed those possessed by other bodies or individuals, end of quote. So asking questions on behalf of the people of Guyana, who we are elected to represent, is a parliamentary privilege, Mr. Speaker. These proposed amendments force us to discuss a fundamental in our parliamentary responsibility. And that is, we've heard it this morning, even from the other side, the ability to scrutinize the work and decisions of the executive on behalf of the people of Guyana, which we have been elected to do. The ability to ask questions ensures we inform, educate the people on key decisions made in this House that impact on the development and future of the same citizens who put us here to represent them, ensuring transparency and accountability. Mr. Speaker, as a Parliament, we've been an abysmal failure in how we've handled the presentation of motions and the importance of ministers being accountable to the Parliament and the people in terms of a timely response to questions. As we just heard from the Honourable Member Sarabo's presentation, in other jurisdictions, answers are provided, or a commitment to provide an answer is given within as low as 2 days and as high as five days. So, Mr. Speaker, in any part of the world, we assume that a Parliament's willingness to answer any question that citizens or member of Parliament may have would be something that you want to endorse, something you want to support. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that on January 20th, I submitted 12 questions on the Gas to Shore project. And just to stress the importance of this project, I want to refer to an oil gas report. I have it here for the record if necessary, which quotes the Honorable Guyana Prime Minister, who, and the headline says, Guyana Prime Minister pegs cost of gas to shore energy project at $1.8 billion US dollars. $1.8 billion US dollars. And Mr. Speaker, 12 questions are asked on the 20th of January on this very important $1.8 billion US dollar project. And Mr. Speaker, a response was given 27 days later. And I want to read what that response said. If you listen, Honorable Member, you will see what that response was. So the questions were posed on the 20th of January, and on the 3rd of March, I received a written response to my questions which were submitted. And here is the response. His Honor the Speaker has asked me to inform you that the information you sought by way of questions dated the 20th of January was supplied by Mr. Winston Brassington, head of the Guyana Gas to Energy Task Force, in the Daily Chronicle and Stabroek News of the 16th of February. So what I'm showing you is that from the 20th of January to the 16th of February, the people of Guyana and all of us were not entitled to a response and to be educated on those critical issues on a $1.8 billion gas project. And this is precisely why we're saying, in good stead and in good faith, that we could do better as a parliament in terms of how we are educating our population on key issues and key questions that they are asking. So I want to highlight that when that question was asked on the 20th of January, there was nothing in the public domain that answered the questions precisely. And so this parliament waited 27 days to more or less brush me and my questions off. And this is precisely why we're debating this moment. At a minimum, within 4 days, an indication as to where your questions would stand is something that I would think that we can consider. And the thing that we keep missing is what is the perception that is created everywhere in the public domain when for more than 26 days you are unable to answer key questions. Mr. Speaker, the standing orders quite rightly say, and I quote, that the Speaker shall be the sole judge. And Mr. Speaker, we support that. I endorse the role that you play. Mr. Speaker, we hold you to a high standard. Guyana expects you to be strong in your independence. What would have been so terrible in forwarding those critical questions for answer? Even if at a minimum, we were just ensuring that all Guyanese could remember the exact answers as proffered by the Honorable Prime Minister, who is in charge of the sector, or just to ensure we were continuing the process of educating and informing people. Mr. Speaker, can't we work together on something as basic as this? Providing credible information? So, Mr. Speaker, I think I've explained the spirit in which the questions were asked and the high anticipation that there would have been answers that the Prime Minister himself would have presented to those critical answers. Mr. Speaker, I want to go to another aspect that's very, very close and is part of the same contents of questions. And I want to quote 21A. The proper object of a question is to obtain information on a question of fact within the official cognizance of the minister to whom it is addressed or asked for official action. So that's why we're asking the question. We want the man or woman in charge to answer. I want to take us to subsection K in that same section on the contents of questions. And K says, a question shall not be asked as to whether statements in the media or of private individuals or bodies or persons are accurate. And that is understandable. We can't ask a person in authority, say a minister, to have to answer questions made by the media or a private individual that happen to be in the public domain. Mr. Speaker, the flip side of that would be to ask the public or a sitting member of parliament to go to a newspaper article, which is a report by a member of the media of a specific report of a specific group of information. In this case, it was information presented on the oil and gas industry, but they were quoting not the minister. You're quoting a third person and saying the reporter, the media reported is actually accurate and gospel. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I hope that I've shown the flaw in this situation. I hope that I've shown that 27 days is insufficient time, is way too long to have no response. And then to get a response that says, no, I'm sorry, read the public newspaper, especially when we have every day persons that say that what was reported as them saying, in fact, was not so. And that is not only for the Chronicle, but all newspapers. And therefore, I think the ethical and the action that should have been taken with humility is that the question should have been presented, the Honorable Prime Minister answer, and people be better informed. For that reason, I would like to suggest, and I endorse the recommendations of this motion, that 4 days is enough time to say what the position of these questions and what the results could be. Answering questions is a parliamentary privilege, and it is there to inform and educate us all. I hope we can get support for this. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And now for the Honourable Member, Mr. Alistair Charlie.
Thank you. Honorable Speaker and esteemed members of this distinguished Parliament. Honorable Speaker, I have listened to the speakers before me, the opposition speakers before me, and permit me to rebut to the Honorable Sarabu Hali. The Honorable Member told this House, as a matter of fact, Honorable Speaker, and cited some clauses from the UK's Parliament. But the Honorable Member failed to understand the difference between the UK's standing order and Guyana's Parliament standing orders. The clauses that the Honorable Member cited was after a motion is passed. Today we are dealing with a motion that is prior. That is the difference, and the Honorable Member could not have understood that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Cathy Hughes alluded to the fact that she waited 27 days and had the audacity to tell this House that 27 days is too long, hence recommending 4 days. Mr. Speaker, when we choose words in this House, we must be responsible. Mr. Speaker, the Guyanese people awaited 19 months after a no confidence motion was foreign elections, Mr. Speaker, 19 months not adhering to the Constitution of Guyana, 19 months, Mr. Speaker, and added to that, 5 months, the Guyanese, this nation, waited for an elections result. Mr. Speaker, and on to now, the Guyanese people, they are waiting for the SOPs of the coalition government. Come out and show the coalition parties, come out and show the Guyanese your SOPs to prove that you say you won the regional general elections of 2020. So when we come to this House, Mr. Speaker, we must choose responsible words. Mr. Speaker, with this, I vehemently oppose this proposed amendment of the standing orders presented by the Honorable Opposition Member Ganesh Mahipal. While acknowledging the perpetual need for enhancing our parliamentary procedures, I firmly assert that the proposed amendments to Standing Order number 23-2, inclusion of Standing Order number 23 and Standing Order number 27-2 are superfluous and carry the potential for unseen ramifications on the seamless functioning of this esteemed assembly. Honorable Speaker, let us scrutinize the proposed amendment to Standing Order number 22. The notion of replacing the existing provision with a mandatory requirement for questions and motions to be directly submitted to the Speaker within a 4-day window raises concerns pertaining to efficacy, assumes a critical role in managing parliamentary documentation, ensuring its appropriate dissemination, and maintaining records. Bypassing this well-established process risks sowing confusion, delays, and potential oversights in the handling of questions and motions. Hence, Honorable Speaker, it is of paramount importance to preserve a lucid and effective chain of command to safeguard the integrity of our parliamentary proceedings. Furthermore, Honorable Speaker, the suggested inclusion of Standing Order 23 empowers the Speaker to label questions as an abuse of the right of questioning or as inadmissible. While addressing the issue of potential misuse of parliamentary procedures is essential, it is equally imperative to ensure that such determinations are grounded in the objective criteria rather than subjective judgment. The proposed language lacks the necessary precision to define what constitutes an abuse or infringement of standing orders, thereby paving the way for inconsistent rulings and perceptions of bias in the Speaker's role. Upholding the principles of equity and impartiality is crucial to preserve public trust in our parliamentary system. Turning to the proposed amendment of Standing Order number 27-2, which grants the Speaker the authority to determine the admissibility of motions, similar concerns come to the fore. while maintaining order and adherence to standing orders remain indispensable. The suggested language lacks specificity in delineating the criteria for assessing the validity of a motion. This lack of clarity may expose motions to arbitrary decisions or misinterpretations. Honorable Speaker, I firmly contend that Guyana's Parliament standing orders in their current form embody comprehensiveness and effectiveness. They serve as a bedrock for the functioning of this noble assembly, facilitating our proceedings with order, efficiency, and equity. Consequently, I implore all members to preserve the integrity of our parliamentary processes by upholding the existing standing orders. It is crucial to recognize that our parliamentary system is in culmination of years of democratic evolution. Our standing orders encapsulate the collective wisdom of generations of parliamentarians who have labored tirelessly to establish a framework ensuring the efficient operation of this assembly. Honorable Speaker, while it is natural to identify improvement in any proposed amendments, demand meticulous consideration to forestall inadvertent consequences, disruptions to the established processes that have served us admirably. Amending the standing orders should not be taken lightly, Honorable Speaker, as it necessitates a comprehensive understanding of the potential ramifications on our parliamentary procedures. Such deliberations warrant scrupulous contemplation of the principles of transparency, accountability, and equal representation that underpin our democratic system. Honorable Speaker, our prevailing standing orders have withstood the test of time, having been refined and honed to enable us to discharge our legislative responsibilities effectively. They foster a level playing field for all members, including you, empowering them to contribute to the governance of our nation. Honorable Speaker, in conclusion, I respectfully and fervently object to the proposed amendment of Standing Order number 22 and inclusion of Standing Order number 23 and the amendment of Standing Order number 27-2. With this submission, Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, Mr. Charlie, and now for the Honorable Member, Ms. Annette Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I join with my colleagues from this side of the House to contribute to the debates on what I consider a simple and straightforward motion moved by my colleague, the Honorable Member Ganesh Mahipal, on the amendments of Standing Orders 22, 23, and 27-2. Sir, personally, I would like to commend my colleague for tabling this motion, which in my view should have the fullest and unwavering support of the National Assembly. As legislators, sir, we are not only here to debate bills, approved annual budgets, and attend meetings of the respective parliamentary committees. Our responsibilities are also to craft procedure and rules governing the functioning of this assembly. Also to have issues affecting our constituents are debated and solutions sought. That being said, Mr. Speaker, I have no intention in going beyond 30 minutes but stay within the allotted time afforded to me, since my colleagues, Honorable Tabitha Sarbo-Halley and Catherine Hughes, have both adequately provided substance as to why this motion should get the full support from this National Assembly. When one examines the current standing order 22, 23, and 27-2 in their original form, it can be described as time-consuming and bureaucratic, sir, which is not helpful to the process of efficiency and effectiveness in the execution of our parliamentary mandate. With the amendments now being sought, Mr. Speaker, I believe will assist gravely in the expedition of information becoming available to members asking. When you looked at the resolved clauses, Mr. Speaker, in the motion, simply seeking for a 4 days turnaround between the clerk's office and that of the Speaker whenever questions and motions are submitted to the Parliament office. Mr. Speaker, I am in full confidence of this proposition. Reason being, I have had my own experiences when motion and questions were submitted to the clerk's office, not receiving timely feedback. Mr. Speaker, I would usually check with the clerk's office to inquire what is causing the delay. Because, Mr. Speaker, I believe that I have a duty and responsibility to my constituents in providing them timely information on concerns they raise with me. And I want to cite one particular example, my own experience, sir. On January 14, 2022, I submitted a motion for this assembly to address the high cost of living issue that our people face on a daily basis in this country, and how we, the 65 members in this assembly, can find solutions and recommendations in solving the high cost of living for our people. But you know what was worrying to me, Mr. Speaker? It was the lengthy delay. In January, I got a letter from the clerk's office stating that you have given full approval for the motion to be debated. It was placed on the order paper to be debated in April. So from January to April, practically 3 months after, Mr. Speaker, when that motion was placed on the order paper and was about to be debated on the day, lo and behold, the night before, we were informed on this side of the House that the motion cannot be proceeded with because it contravenes some section of the Constitution. What we did on this side of the House, we amended, sir, based on the instruction. Again, you approved it for it to be debated in June of 2022. Lo and behold, sir, the night before the morning the motion was set to be debated, I got a letter from the clerk's office stating that it contravenes some other section of the Constitution. So January to June, sir, of 2022, half of the year, sir. So the other thing too, sir, several questions I put to this assembly. These questions were submitted before myself and 7 others of my colleagues went on suspension on the 4th of August. These questions were all approved by you, sir, placed on the order paper, and because of my suspension suspension. Now tell me, sir, 7 months of my suspension, these questions were not answered until I returned to the National Assembly in February. I had to resubmit these questions. Sir, February to now, Honorable Member Gail Teixeira, listen carefully. February to now, sir, we're now in the month of May. These questions are on the order paper. And then the absence of the ministers not being here today to provide the appropriate responses. I don't know when again we're meeting. Sir. So perhaps we're going to meet in July when they want more money, when they come for more money, sir. Then perhaps the questions will be answered. So, sir, Mr. Speaker, as I shared several weeks ago, during my presentation on the single window system bill, number 26 of 2022, where I mentioned from a quotation by the Honorable Member Anil Nandalal, who leveled accusations against us on this side of the House. I shall repeat, and I heard it from the previous speaker, Honorable Charlie, and his colleague, the Honorable Datadin. And this is what Anil, the Honorable Member, had to say on April 20th, 2023, when he was conducting an interview on NCN regarding local government elections 2023. And this is what he had to say. We are obstructionists than constructive. So, sir, today, we're not obstructivists. We're not obstructivists, sir. We're being constructive, sir. The mere fact we can submit a motion asking for the standing orders 22, 23, and 27-2 to be amended to just cater for 4 days rather than 27 days and months, or 6 months, probably a year for responses. Isn't this constructive and reasonable, sir? So, sir, the other point he raised, we do not give constructive contributions. You heard from my colleague, the Honorable Tabitha Sarabo, who quoted what is happening in the UK, what is happening in Canada, and what is happening in some part of the world regarding their standing order. You heard from Catherine Hughes, my Honorable Member, making recommendations how we can improve. Isn't it that we're offering constructive recommendations, my colleagues? He also stated, Comrade Speaker, when we, the opposition, not in the National Assembly, the business of the House flows smoothly. But when we are here, there is no constructive alternatives, only constructive criticism. Well, Comrade Speaker, I guess the Honorable Member will agree with me this morning that we have provided, as I said before, constructive recommendation how we can improve Standing Order 22, 23, and 27-2. And Mr. Speaker, we are missing a big thing here, We are missing a big thing here, It was my colleagues on that side of the House in 2020 to get rid of my Honorable Member as chairperson of the PAC. What they did, sir, they brought a motion to this House and amend the standing order to get their way. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member Anil Nandalal accused us of breaking mace. But as I stand from this position, I am seeing the mace right before me intact. That then accused us, sir, of stealing the mace. But we're all seeing the mace before us, sir. Mr. Speaker, we were accused of assaulting parliamentary staff. Now, which one of these staff would have reported that they were assaulted by any member of the opposition? I'm still awaiting that report. We are accused of dancing and singing, but sir, we were accused of dancing and singing. We blow whistles and we behave in most unparliamentary manner. But let me tell you something. You forgot what Cheddy Jagan did, the late Cheddy Jagan did with the mace. You forgot what Honorable Dharam Lal did when he verbally assaulted my colleagues on this side of the house. You forgot what my honorable friend, Christian brother in the faith, the Honorable Bishop Edgell did some years ago in the National Assembly. We forgot what Kwame McCoy, the Honorable Member, did in this National Assembly to my colleague Tabitha. So who behaves in an unparliamentary way, sir? Therefore, Mr. Speaker, today we on this side of the Assembly have demonstrated that we are constructive and have explicitly provided solutions and recommendations how the proposed amendments to Standing Orders 22, 23, and 27 can assist in strengthening parliamentary democracy, which will aid us as representatives of constituents and constituencies in providing adequate and timely feedback to the people of Guyana. As I prepare to conclude, Mr. Speaker, I would urge my colleagues on the opposite side of this assembly to support this motion. I have heard two of the members so far. They have spoken that they have no intention of supporting this motion. All right, you're so concerned. You're so concerned about the 4 days. But what you fail to do is to provide to the National Assembly an amendment to up to the 4 days. And I guess we will all support it. It should not be used, Mr. Speaker, it should not be used for political grandstanding. And we saw the display this morning about SOPs, about who rigged, about who this, and about who that. But they forgot the SOPs have all outlived, the SORs have all outlived the SOPs. But you know what they're failing to chant, sir? The local government, the forgeries of dead people, the forgeries of migrant people for the local government elections of 2023. And listen to me, Mr. Speaker, he's not here today, but I guess he's somewhere, and his ears are glued to what I have to say here this morning. It was the Honorable Bara Jagdeo who went publicly to offer an apology to families who lost their loved one. So fraud is fraud. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said before, we should not use this motion. We should not use this motion for political standing and politicking, but for the benefit will derived. I just fix your business, right? but for the benefits it will derive for all of us as legislators. Mr. Speaker, as I stated in my opening remarks, I will reiterate once again by commending my colleague, the Honorable Ganesh Mahipal, for tabling a motion of this nature to amend Standing Orders 22, 23, and 27-2, and call on all of us, 65, Bishop, I know you're going to join with me as a brother in the faith, call on all of us on the other side of this assembly to give full support to the motion. Let us demonstrate maturity and show our citizens that we can disagree to agree. Can we do it? I will boldly say, sir, yes, we can. Once again, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may God bless us all. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, just before I yield to my seat, let me take this opportunity. I should have done that before. You know, Vikram is a very close, dear friend of mine. But I just want to take this opportunity in extending happy birthday to my colleague and brother, Vikram Bharat. May God continuous blessings be with you, and may you live to see many, many other birthdays. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you very much, Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson. You see how good your presentation is when I don't have to interrupt you? Excellent. And now for the Honorable Member, Mr. David Patterson. David?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, put on back your mic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and let me start off by joining my colleagues in wishing the Minister Vikram happy birthday. You gotta leave that for the side of the house, boss. We're not blushes over here. Mr. Speaker, I stand here in support of the motion moved by my honorable colleague, Ganesh Mahipal. Sir, this motion is simple, and it's simply seeking to bring some sort of conformity, structure, understanding to the process of submissions of motions and the time frame and questions and the time frame for the turnaround of these motions, sir. It has no hidden agenda. It's simply seeking, Mr. Speaker, so that we can ensure that the business of this House can be done in a structured manner. And I like to give the members, I mean, obviously not in here, but the members of the public listening, reasons why we on this side of the House think that such a motion and approval of such a motion would be of benefit to this Parliament. Mr. Speaker, in October of 2021, sir, I submitted a motion on the shore bases, a question of location of shore bases and those things like that. No, so a motion. I submitted, honorable member, not a question. I submitted a motion to be debated on October of 2021. Sir, the motion is, I mean, I know the honorable member, and I'm going to show, sir, I don't know, I was particularly singled out, I don't know, for whatever reasons. Sir, the motion took 80 days to be approved, and 81 to be debated. I asked every 2 weeks, and exactly as the honorable member said, you would ask the parliamentary staff, can I have the status of the motion? And they would very meekly and humbly reply, it's with the Speaker. I have forwarded to the Speaker for his response. You asked the Speaker, and unfortunately, we have one of the busiest speakers in the Commonwealth. He's always traveling. So when you,
Thank you very much. It's a demanding job.
yes, I mean, obviously, and you were enlightened that the Speaker is a part-time job. So the extra time is spent traveling, promoting, of course, the Parliament of Guyana. Today, the Speaker was traveling, and there was no response. When, of course not, we don't want to disturb the Speaker's trip. I mean, we reach so infrequently, so nothing could disturb it. Sir, when the Speaker was eventually approached, and I'm only using these as background for the public to understand why such a motion would be taken. When the Speaker was approached, he said, sir, it's been 50, 60 days. He says he had responded to the clerks. He responded to the Parliament. Sorry, I'm here in front of you, sir. You could stop me anytime I misquote anything that you say. And when he said, oh dear, it's now back with the Parliament. The Parliament said no. Eventually, sir, we found out the mistake was a human mistake. The Speaker had responded to the clerk in an email, but forgot to press send. So it was in his draft folder. And the Speaker said it was in his draft folder. 80 days on a very important matter. The day before the day, and this is what the public has to know, the day before it was debated the day before the budget. So Saturday, of course, we went here till 4 in the morning. The motion was defeated, and the next day was in the budget, and the government put in $43 billion for the project. And sir, I'm not assuming anything nefarious about it, but it's very strange, the coincidence of what happened, sir. So the motion is simply saying, let us have a timeline. So therefore, at the end of the expiration, the 4th day, the 10th day, the 15th day, somebody could say to the Speaker or to the clerk, you haven't responded. And they can check their draft folders and their emails and press send. That's all. So there are timelines, so therefore people can obviously be. So when the timelines are hit, something happens. Sir, to leave it open-ended, sir, will suffer the fate in which I did, sir. But that's not the only one, sir. I submitted a motion, a question before. Yes. A question October 18th, 2022 on the Wales gas issue. Of course, I shadowed the oil industry. It took 36 days for approval. This time, sir, it wasn't an issue of no one wanted to press send. It was simply an issue of nothing. Absolutely nothing from the Parliament, absolutely nothing from anyone. And sir, what the reason that we're doing here, the reason we're bringing this motion is we don't fall into these things. They belong to the timeline. Sir, we know you're a busy man. We know the Parliament clerk, of course, they're full-time, so therefore the time constraints here. Sir, insurance motions are submitted on insurance, sir. It took 36 days. 36 days, sir. And after it was surgically dissected several times, it made it onto the order paper. And of course, there's an issue. There's an issue between being published as a notice paper and debated. That's quite something. Sir, that is not acceptable for a country, sir, that is deemed to be the fastest growing economy in the world, where questions submitted on behalf of the people of Guyana and motions can take 3 months. And Ferguson spoke about 6 months. Sir, most times, and I'm not opposing it, most times when we query this, and of course I have finance, I send emails, I don't ring, so I like to back. Most times when we query this, the response has always been, it's with the Speaker. You have to pick this up with the Speaker. Sir, we're not accusing anyone. Sir, we know that there is a saying, well, I know, sir, there's a saying that a bad workman blames his tools. Sir, all this motion is seeking to do is ensure that you, Mr. Speaker, and the Parliament have better tools so that the blame can be reduced. Sir, several members of civil society, in particular a group, Red Thread, and a group of female activists, as I shouted on that, have asked us, me in particular, to submit questions to the Parliament, sir, because they would have submitted these questions to all the ministries, including the ministry headed by my good friend who's celebrating his birthday today. Several questions, sir. I'm copying on them. These questions are submitted almost on a daily basis. So the Office of the Prime Minister, the Office, the Vice President, EPA, Exxon, EEPGL, sir, and not one of these questions that they would have submitted was answered, not even responded to, right? That's outside the Parliament. And as a last resort, sir, and as a last resort, they've asked if myself and some other members can raise it in Parliament. And unfortunately, we had to say, I said to them, it's almost a fruitless effort here, because by the time your questions get in, by the time the Parliament, and I must for the record say this here before anyone in the Parliament staff comes to me afterwards and says that they're not doing their job. They acknowledge receipt within 24 hours. The Parliament staff acknowledges receipt within 24 hours of your submission. And I must commend them for that. So there's the 4 hours, the 4 days proposed by Honorable Member, my boss, does not even account for the Parliament staff. Within 24 hours, they acknowledge receipt. Sir, so the blame, the 4 hours, we don't have to put a timeline in for the Parliament staff, sir. The timeline obviously lies elsewhere. And I've said to them, it is a fruitless effort. That our Speaker is a wise and busy man. He has several issues which he has to contemplate, and they're addressing the bothersome motions at times from persons, particularly from myself. I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues, and I don't want to speak with them. Maybe is not a priority. What we're seeking to do here is obviously not make it a priority, but make it in such that there is a notation in the Speaker, and I must commend him for this as well. I must commend him. I'm remiss of me if I don't mention him. He is a fella like me that likes electronic. Yes, he does everything online, and I commend you for that. Sir, there's a little tag online which would be called a reminder. Sir, so if we pass this motion and the Parliament staff gives you something today, automatically it sets a reminder in 4, 5, 6 days, so that you would know, it pops up on your screen at the beginning of the day, wherever part of the world you are, that you are supposed to respond by. So, and if there and the motion contemplates, sir, if you're too busy or the Parliament is too busy, we're engaged in budgetary debates or something like that, you can notify the mover of the motion or the submitter of the question that we are busy this moment, we require additional time. Sir, the 4 days is just simply for you to acknowledge and respond. Sir, if the proposed timelines is deemed restrictive, sir, and I said it wouldn't be restrictive for the Parliament staff, because they respond within 24 hours. It would not. So if it is deemed restrictive for the other persons that have to look at it and approve, the government, sir, and with your suggestion, your guidance, like you've been always great at guiding them so far in this 12th Parliament, you've guided them along the absolutely correct path, always, and ensure that they stayed along this correct path. You can, with your suggestions, sir, you can always suggest an alternative. If 4 days is too short, too restrictive, like honorable member that it is set out if it falls on Good Friday and those things like that. We don't count holidays, but never mind. We're contemplating 4 working days. You can, sir, suggest an alternative timeline. However, in doing nothing, sir, in us as a collective doing nothing, shows that we are not progressing. It shows that as a parliament, we're not even, sir, you, one of the initiatives I know that you have been championing is the e-parliament, and I endorse that. But what is the use of e-parliament without structure and timelines? So the objective of e-parliament obviously to become more efficient. And more efficient requires timelines and milestones and guidelines. And so this, your support and maybe your nudging of the government side support for motion like this, probably is the first cog in the wheel to us achieving your e-parliament ambitions. So I urge the members on the other side of the House not to simply look at this as a motion that has any other hidden agenda. It's simply bringing some structure and timeline to the process. So with those few words, I like to endorse the motion, and I trust when the next speaker gets up on the opposition side, she will propose an alternative date if the 4 days are too restrictive, and we can all unanimously agree. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable members, I will continue to the completion of this motion, then we'll take a break. Honorable Member, Mr. Ramjatan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And happy birthday, Barack. I want to just read a note on the standing orders, the most recent edition which I have, which indicates that standing orders are not written stone. They're subject to review. They're subject to amendments, especially when those amendments will enforce and ensure an efficacy to the work that we do here. And the standing orders of the National Assembly, and I'm reading, were amended in 2011 by the Special Select Committee in the report of the draft standing orders. Members worked assiduously in conducting meetings over a 4-year period, where they carefully considered making deletions, insertions, and also ensuring that the language is gender neutral. On 25th of July 2011, the report of the draft standing orders was adopted by the National Assembly. Further amendments were made thereafter, in July and December 2012, to these standing orders. Mr. Speaker, on matters of questions put to ministers and motions by the opposition, you are the gatekeeper. That is an important point in every Westminster-type democracy. You are the gatekeeper as to whether the question is qualified to be put on the table, and of course, when a motion is to be put. And what we have is that an open-ended sort of arrangement was granted drafting in 2011 because we were informed, and I recall this because I was a member of the standing committee, that there is a convention that speakers are going to ensure that questions and motions from the opposition are heard as expeditiously as possible, and if they do not qualify, that disqualification will come very early. Because, indeed, rules in this honorable, noble assembly are generally sometimes best made and left unwritten. It is necessarily so because not only of historical reasons in which we took our methods from, which has by practices and procedures and so on that are largely unwritten, written in a book by Erskine May. And so it is in that context then whereby being the gatekeeper and having a convention that you will deal with matters expeditiously, it was left open-ended as it is in the standing orders 22, 23, and 27. What we have seen, and that is just like the law, whenever you see certain things occurring in the law or any other institution that requires timeliness in decision-making or time dealing with an issue, you then can come and change or amend or insert a new amendment. And what Mr. Mahipal is doing here is simply the fact that it, as Mr. David Patterson just mentioned, a matter took 8 days to be determined, and we all know you're a very busy man. I know that you're a very busy man. It is important that we now ensure for future parliaments that a time period be granted, not necessarily for the answering of the question, Mr. Speaker. This is for you to make a determination whether the question and motion is qualified or not. And if it is so qualified, that you place it on the order paper. 4 days. So once indeed it is known that the clerk has received the question or motion, within a 4-day period thereafter, it should be then, and it is sent to you, and we know that conventionally the clerk operates pretty efficaciously. He would send it to you within probably hours or a day. You then must ensure that you make the determination that this matter should be then ruled on as to whether it's qualified or not. And if so qualified, that it be put on the table. Timelines in view of our little history in this 12th Parliament are needed. And we can see that it is needed because whenever a question or a motion comes up, it is because the maker of that question or the person questioning or the person making the motion, the mover of the motion, by virtue of his politics on the ground, see that it is necessary. It is topical at that point in time. And the reason why he or she then asks the question or moves the motion. When then you have a delay that can be extensive in it not even being tabled or the decision not being known whether it is disqualified, there is a certain disadvantage that mover of the motion or asker of the question is put into. And especially now, since we are a representative democracy, the people who might have urged the question or motion are then not in a position, but until some 80 days after, to make the point, to know that indeed it was disqualified. Or it is, just please. It is something that is, what I am trying to get at is the uncertainty. There is. You would know this, Mr. Speaker, because indeed you were a parliamentarian too that wanted questions to be answered by ministers. I was there with you. You had moved motions too. And as far as I can recall, those were done expeditiously. In view of the fact that it is not being done expeditiously, and we are not in any way denigrating you as a speaker. We are simply saying that in accordance with the evolution of our parliament development, that it is necessary now that we put in a deadline period. And deadline periods are necessary. I remember when being in the Parliament in 2009, our constituents, and even at that time the government's constituents, had indicated that judges are taking a long time to write their decisions. They hear the trial, they take all the evidence, and then nothing happens for long periods of time. And, we then went to Parliament in 2009 and passed the time limit, I can't recall the correct name, Time Limit for Judicial Decisions Act 2009. Yes, Judicial Time Limits for Judicial Decisions Act, I think it was, 2009. And we indicated that once the trial is completed in the High Court, within 160 days, I think it was, there must be a decision. At the Court of Appeal level, we indicated that it must be, I think, 30 days after arguments are heard that you must do that. Why? Because we wanted expeditiousness about our decision making. And the expeditiousness is a fundamental pillar because decisions affect people's lives. In the case of the High Court and the Court of Appeal, it affects the parties. It affects precedents because we want them as early as possible. In this case, we want to know the answers to questions as early as possible. So the people that got the answer must know that the thing is laid on the table there. We should, yeah. In this case, where we are asking via Mr. Mahipal through this motion that it be done in a 4-day period after you would have gotten it as to whether it's disqualified or not, is fundamental because there can't be any delays or any uncertainties because in 4 days you would have made a ruling. If indeed it is disqualified, it is disqualified. Well, we could come again with some amendments, or you could amend it as you have done with a couple of my questions. And then it's proceeded with. Then, of course, we would expect the convention that ministers ought to, as within a short time as possible, as our kind mayor has said. In England, it's about 2 days, 3 days. They got to answer because the thing is topical. Why are you going to wait 80 days or more or 40 days when it is not topical? That is not democracy. The people out there would like to know the answer now. And if the representative of the people find that indeed it is, then there should be a quick answer to the question as possible. So there is nothing, as was said by Mr. Sanjeev Dattadin, and I must say that it is rather weak submissions he made, very tenuous, that we will not suffer at the whim and fancy of the opposition by asking for a 4-day. The entire tenor and intent of this has been missed by him completely. And the whole point of it is that indicating that we are doing damage to democracy. If it is anything, just like the conventions in England and other Commonwealth countries that indicate that, yes, a speaker will do it in a very quick time, make the decision, and thereafter the minister will be allowed a quick time to answer, or the motion will be given time in Parliament to be debated, like this one. It is all for the strengthening of democracy. And that extraordinarily robust period that we had during the 2002 period with all those basic needs for parliamentary, the two Englishmen that came. You know that period, sir. This is what we did when we drafted and strengthened the standing orders. It was clearly to strengthen scrutiny. Scrutiny for our people. When opposition members ask questions, it is done so entirely to scrutinize government. And a government that wants scrutiny must understand that it enhances the democracy and accountability and the transparency. And so I cannot understand when he indicated that we are not going to suffer the women fancy of the opposition when they ask for 4 days. And very untypical, a very good lawyer, he gives the impression as if the holidays must count now. Come on, I didn't understand that because he knows holidays don't count. But whatever it is, Mr. Speaker, this is but something that will assist us in knowing answers, getting information. And you know why too? Because we got a commissioner of insurance. And it is a notorious fact that indeed we don't get answers from the commissioner of information. I said insurance. Commissioner of that appeal, no? But it is important. And we don't get. I have asked personally questions for answers by my good friend, Mr. Ben, because I speak here also for public security. Scrutiny. Yeah, well, I can ask. Or I am also a member that could ask any question. Any member could ask any question. And the other aspect of the matter that I want to bring is scrutiny is so important that we then also had created in that 2002 period something called the Public Security Sector Reform Committee, Public Security Parliamentary Committee, whereby questions could be asked, and if they feel that the answers are sensitive, we ought to get them in that committee. That committee has not been set up. So it seems like we don't want scrutiny. 3 years now, we name the people from the opposition and the government who will sit in that committee, and no meeting thereafter has been. Why this escape from transparency and scrutiny and questioning and cross-examination and all of that? And why after the convention says, when I'm going through Erskine May, generally when you have these committees formed, parliamentary committees, within a reasonable time, because they give you a little space, they must become operational. They must become operational. What do we have here in relation to a parliamentary scrutiny committee? Nothing. We can't even ask Mr. May Thomas anything about all that has happened recently. But you know what? When we were in government, they called Mr. Silal Prasad.
But, honorable member, persons who are not in the House to represent themselves, you shouldn't name them. So there are two names. Yeah.
We had questions coming from the ministers then, the opposition then. Mr. Harry Gill, Madam Gil Teixeira. If you see questions that came to me, all right, we're going to form this committee. We form it, and for 3 years or whatever, questions asked. Okay, well, what's your policy on crime? Okay, come, Mr. Silal Prasad, and he gave everything. Oh, well, what are your plans on prison? Everything. So the scrutiny that is a bulwark of democracy was done. And so to that extent, then I'm saying that, and it was done very expeditiously. We formed the committee and all of that. So whenever now we got problems in security issue, we simply do not have even that, what is called in-camera method by which we could get the answers. We can't. And I am pleading again publicly here, Mr. Ben, convene meetings and let us start getting operational that public security sector committee. I want to say that in this standing orders, we got timelines. Timelines is not a new thing. I want to add this point to what I have made before. I have gone through the standing orders hundreds of times, and I can recall that there's a 1 month period sometimes we put timelines. Was it not only recently when we had that select committee whereby something is going into the select committee? 1 month. 1 month we got to go to the select committee and come back here. They put a timeline. Single window bill. And we have had timelines of 6 days written into this standing order, from the first reading of a bill to the second reading of a bill. I think 6 days. Why timeline? It is because for efficacy, effectiveness, and the fact that timeliness, it is very, very important. And so there shouldn't be something that's asking for a 4 days period to know where we stand, whether the question is disqualified or not, or whether it should come with an amendment, and so on. What is wrong about a timeline being put when the conventions in Erskine may say it must be at a most short or reasonable time, to the extent of, in that country, ministers are asked off the bat sometime questions, 2-3 days, because of the topicality that is the nature of question. And so I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, we shouldn't have a government that is aiding and abetting delays to answers of questions or to motions. If this government practices what it preaches, we're going to get support for this motion. Because they have done it with judges, they have done it here with putting timelines and all of that. And so we must have indeed support for this motion for the reasons that I have just mentioned. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And now for the Honourable Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance, the Honourable Member, Ms. Giltshire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is Private Members' Day, and if this is what the private members can come up with, then I think it's a sad reflection of the parliamentary opposition in bringing a motion that has no justification. In fact, Mr. Speaker, allow me to offer a criticism, and that is that I believe you and the clerk have been very lenient in allowing a motion that has no justification, because I've always been taught that when you want to bring a be it resolved clause, you must have an explanation of why you come to that point. But I understand you have been very flexible, and I congratulate you. But the issue is that in this House today, we've heard how many speakers from the opposition? About 5 or 6, and each one has given a different interpretation of what the motion means. And I assume Ganesh at the end will summarize and have his grand farewell, the grand combination of his speech, and the honourable member, of course, and that he will then give finally, after 10 speakers, the rationalization for this motion, which is an absolute waste of time. However, we all have to fly on the wings we're given. And so this motion is supposed to be dealing with the process of a question going into the clerk to the speaker, and to the MP who's raised the question. So all the contributions about length of time to answer questions is irrelevant. And that has only been for you to have a chance to speak on Private Members' Day because you had no other business to speak on. And so, of all the urgent and major issues of this country, this is what you came up with. Are really interesting. But Mr. Speaker, before I get too caught up in my presentation, I want to have a correction. A comment was made about 80 days and a question that wasn't answered, etc., etc. On January the 16th, 2023, according to the minutes of proceedings of this House, the 16th of January 2023, Mrs. Valda Lawrence asked the Prime Minister on the gas to shore pipeline project. Her question was published on December the 12th, and it was answered on January the 16th, less than a month or about a month, and it was answered by the Prime Minister, and the minutes of the proceedings show the Prime Minister's answers to the questions. So I don't know what Mrs. Hughes is talking about, because a minister doesn't need to answer the same question twice. And in fact, the House has the right, and the Speaker and the Clerk have to. So if the honourable member submitted her question on January the 20th, it came after the statement and response of the Prime Minister to Ms. Valda Lawrence, who preempted her colleague in asking the same question. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask that the minutes of January the 16th, 2023 be circulated. The minutes of the January 16th be circulated with particular reference to pages 11 and to 12, which has, 10 and 11, which have the Prime Minister's response to the issue on the gas to shore pipeline. I'm talking about the question that Mrs. Hughes referred to that took 80 days, etc., and all the long story that she gave. I'm talking about Mrs. Hughes. You weren't here. So I'm not referring to you, Mr. Patterson. Don't tell me who to refer to. Don't tell me who to refer to, Mr. Patterson. I'm quite aware of what I'm dealing with. Mr. Speaker, the issue of that, when you pick corn, when the chicken picks corn, they don't always see the whole area where all the corn is. And the problem with this question is that you're cherry picking on a standing orders. First of all, I've heard all sorts of comments about the standing orders. The standing orders are the rules of engagement of this House. They are subject to amendments. And in fact, in 2006, 2005 to 2006, the Sir Michael Davies report and the CPA presented, and at that time the Speaker of the House was Mr. Ralph Ramkaran. There was a special select committee that went through for 1 year, in which both sides of the House were present. And I think Mr. Manzoor Nadir is very familiar with that. That, taking the Davies report and the recommendations, did not alter these particular sections of the standing order. Did not. The reason being that the practices relate to ensuring that the standing orders relate to each other. The government has so much time to table something, the government has so much time to answer something. The opposition has so much time. When you start tinkering, you start unraveling. And as usual, I think this whole exercise was for opportunistic purposes to at least have something to say on Private Members' Day, particularly critical of the government. And you didn't have an opportunity, you needed an opportunity, and this is what you've got, and that's fine. But then when you open the door and you open the Pandora's door, prepare to deal with Pandora's box. Because what comes out of Pandora's box, some very interesting contradictions with what some of you have spoken about today. And let me do some reminding. First of all, just as a fact, the clerk is the custodian of the parliamentary procedures of this House. The clerk is the advisor to the Speaker in regards to what is procedurally allowed and not allowed. And that has been the practice from Mr. Narayan's time, etc., etc. And that's also captured in Erskine May in terms of the table officer, the clerk, and the Speaker. In fact, a lot of comments were made about Erskine May, and I just want to quote, as you've all been quoting, or some of you have been quoting, on page 342. The Speaker is the final authority as to the admissibility of questions. Irregularities in a notice of a question are dealt with in the manner adopted regarding notice of motion, and it refers you to the other pages, and are corrected in the table of this for or reserved for consideration. It goes on that the Speaker's responsibility in regard to questions is limited to their compliance with the rules of the House. And of course, under the admissibility of motions in our House, which is the same as in the Erskine Mays, the issues of what is an admissible motion or question. In fact, the Speaker can rule out a number of issues, for example, regarding what may be considered issues of public interest, issues of public security, public order, including whether it's a repetition of other questions answered before, or whether it's in compliance with the court. But let me just, as I've all heard these grand statements, you have to go back in to do your homework. When 2011 was another special select committee set up to once again go through the standing orders, right? And the report came out in 2011 before the 2011 elections. But this was after the 2006 Special Select Committee put forward all the amendments in 2006 before the 2006 elections. The members of that committee, Dr. Leslie Ramsamy, Dr. Frank Anthony, Mansoor Nadir, the Honorable Maniram Prasad, myself, Moses Nagamutu, Winston Murray for the opposition, Clarissa Rio, Lance Carberry, and Kemraj Ramchatan. So the 2011 committee, which report is here, that was tabled, the report of the Special Select Committee on the report of the draft standing orders. This was gone through, and this committee also looked at every single standing order in what had been amended and so on under Sir Davies. And when it came to the Standing Order 20 to do with timelines, it made no changes. And there's a reason why, because it was felt that the clerk and the Speaker have to have time to do their work. And it's not about people traveling and all that nonsense you all talked about. And I'll give you some examples of where in the last Parliament, where previous parliaments, where speakers had to get advice from other parliaments and other lawyers to help them. And I'll give Speaker Trotman on the issue when Minister Rohi was silenced from speaking. And so the matter went to the court, and in the meantime, the motion came to try to get Mr. Trotman to lift the silence. Mr. Trotman, and on another motion that Mr. Greenwich brought to do with cutting the budget of 2012. There's reducing the budget of 2012 and 2013. Mr. Trotman called on a number of speakers in the Caribbean, including one who was his mentor in law school, the speaker in the Dominica Parliament, but called in a number of speakers, hired, as I believe, a number of lawyers to look at this to advise him. It took 9 months, and it was only when the Chief Justice ruled that you could not do this that then it was lifted. But the arguments then came out to lift it. So for 9 months. And let me go to give another one. Let me give another one. Where, let's give probably the most historic one of all, and one you don't like, obviously. The no confidence motion. It was tabled. It was tabled in November, around November 15th, 2018. The Speaker did not allow it, did not approve it. A one-sentence motion that the Erskine May also refers to as one sentence for no confidence motion. That a no confidence motion does not have the explanation. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, you weren't there. Mr. Speaker, you're in the public gallery. I'm talking about minutes and records. Mr. Speaker, I'm seeking your protection. Mr. Speaker, please put the volume louder because I'll start coughing. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Speaker at the time and the Honorable Clerk who was present received the no confidence motion around the 15th of November. It was never approved by the Speaker for weeks. And then it just happened to be approved when the budget began. And the date for the meeting, and the date for the sitting was named as December 18th, 2018. A historic day. Because if it had come before the budget, you would have been out longer. But Mr. Speaker, the fact that the Speaker at the time needed time to see whether the one sentence was in order or not. And he took 5 weeks to do that on a no confidence motion, which you have quoted from the Erskine May that says that a no confidence motion must be dealt with alacrity because the opposition is the body waiting to get into government. And so, Mr. Speaker, you know when people talk through two sides of their mouth, what happens to them? And so, they're talking through two sides of their mouth, Mr. Speaker. Let's go to another example of the great democratic thrust of some of my friends in the opposition who spoke and waxed about democracy. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind my honorable members and colleagues on the other side that the same standing orders which had in the sectoral committees 4 for government, 3 for opposition. When in 2012, after the 2011 elections, the opposition decided, because it wasn't a coalition, but they had 1 seat more, although the People's Progressive Party had the majority of votes, that they decided to get up in Parliament. Dr. Rupert Rupnarain, supported by my friend and my very good friend, Dr. Mr. Ramjatan, to support the members of the sectoral committees being reversed. So the opposition got 4 and the government got 3. Went through the House, big debate, passed. And then we got to 2015, when you're now in government. And lo and behold, Mr. Ramjatan gets up and passes to the honorable member. Don't tell me to speak to motion. You'll speak to no motion. You'll speak to none. You've been drifting all over the world. Don't tell me about nothing. You're not my speaker. You're not the chairman. Be quiet. Mr. Speaker, in 2015, the honorable member, Minister Ramjatan at the time, brought a motion, supported by his other colleagues, to reverse the ruling of 2012, to put back the government as the majority and the opposition as the minority. Now, if that's not opportunism, tell me what is. Because, Mr. Speaker, the arguments in 2012 by my honorable members, Dr. Rupert Rupnarain, who's not here, and Mr. Ramjatan, was that this was a form of democracy, giving the opposition the leadership in the sectoral committees and having greater numbers in the government, that the government then had to answer. You should have heard the debate, man. Must go back to the minutes, go back to the Hansard. You'll be impressed with the arguments for democracy my dear friends gave at the time. But in 2015, the arguments suddenly shift around. Government got to have the majority back in the committee. And what was laughable, my dear friends, what was laughable for us in the opposition is how the members who spoke seem to have suffered from convenient amnesia. Convenient amnesia because you forgot that a few years ago you changed it. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, let's take another example of this great democratic thrust by the opposition members. Let us remember in 2012, for the first time in the history of this parliament, the Speaker spoke about the 70th anniversary of this parliament. And yet, in 2012 to 2015, Mr. Speaker, the government voted, the opposition voted to have the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker. Both. Although names were put forward for Speaker and Deputy Speaker. They voted to get both. In 2015, there was no Deputy Speaker. But 2012 to 2015, the opposition held both the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, you know, if the gentleman wants to open up the door, I can open it. If the honorable member wants to open the door about an agreement that was made, an agreement was made with the AFC to put Ram Grant in the chair. And on the floor of the House, you did a double take, my dear. Double take. And you did a double take. Not to be trusted. Don't tie bundle. Don't tie bundle with these people. They're going to sharp you in the end. Mr. Speaker, when the honorable member, my dear young friend Tabitha, who I have a soft spot for in some ways, except she broke up the communications center, which has disappointed me terribly. But Tabitha, Sarabo Hali, Tabitha referred to the British Parliament. I can't shout over you, comrades. I can't. Comrades, when the honourable member Tabitha Sarabo spoke, the British Parliament was referred to. Again, for the young member, the British Parliament meets full-time. The members are full-time. And so there's no comparison. This is a parliament that is not full-time, that members are not full-time, and therefore the timings are different. And even if you read the Erskine Mays carefully, it says that even when a member puts their name down and asks a question, it has to go in the order of the questions. And so even though people have put questions down in this parliament, you have to wait for your order to come up. That is not the government doing. That is a procedural point in the parliament, which if you ask the clerk to see the books that are kept, that keep the record of when the notices, when the motions and questions come out, then you will see. But Mr. Speaker, all this highfalutin, and beating of one's chest to be able to show that they're democratic, it doesn't remove the stain of certain things, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't remove the stain. You can jump high and low. You can go as far as the Himalayas. It cannot remove the stain of 2018 to 2020, where this country, the Constitution was violated, not the standing orders, not the standing orders, the Constitution was violated by having 19 months wait for an election after no confidence motion, where the Constitution said 3 months. And worse than that, we had to wait another 5 months. So the Guyanese people waited 19 months post a no confidence motion for the declaration of the results and their president being sworn in. And yet in this House, the level of disrespect to make it seem as if this is not the government and to make derogatory comments about the sitting government. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Ashamed. And the electorate will deal with you. I trust always the electorate. In local government elections, you can see what's going to happen. You haven't even fielded constituencies. You're not ashamed of yourself? 239 constituencies you haven't been able to field. 13 local authorities you haven't been able to field. And you come here and big up? You come here and big up? Who are you? Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Member Ganesh, who I've been trying Mr. Speaker, I've been trying to coach. I am trying to coach Ganesh, my Paul, because I believe that there are some members on the opposition side who will make good MPs in the future. But they don't listen, they don't do work, they don't research. Mr. Speaker, this motion before us is saying, first of all, it doesn't tell us why we should change. So maybe show that that's not how it works, my dear. Read your standing orders. But Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the issue is, and I hope therefore when I put up on a motion with no justification, you will allow it to go through, sir. I would hope so. Because I know, having been around, that when the Speaker says no justification, take it back and rewrite, you have to do it. But Mr. Speaker, you know there's something mischief afoot here. The mischief afoot is that the refusal of the members on the opposition side to understand that the issue of questions and motions is not a perfunctory one. It is not that the clerk and the Speaker are post boxes. That's not what perfunctory is. Not derogatory, my dear, if you know what it means. But the issue is that the clerk is not a post office, nor is the Speaker a post office. The clerk is the custodian to check the bills and the motions and the questions. Our bills are checked too by the clerk to make sure. And so the issue of this view is you put in your question and you got to go through in 4 days. This is not how Parliament works. Unfortunately, and I'll give you an example about discipline. We have in some way in this Parliament to recognize authority. The crux of this issue has to do with authority. Who is the authority in charge of the questions and motions? When it was Dr. Scotland, I can say to you, not one of the motions we presented came back unamended. And in some cases, so heavily amended that it lost the context of motion clauses. And let me give you some examples. The one to do with the commission inquiry set up for ancestral lands, which left out the NTC and the Amerindian and NGOs. That motion came to Parliament with recommendations to the government of how to treat with the issue. The Speaker removed 4 of the be it resolved clauses and just put in consider the inclusion of these people. Let's go to the Walter Ross Commission of Inquiry motion, which I brought. I'm saying from my experience because I brought these motions. That the Commission of Inquiry motion on Walter Rodney. That motion that I brought under Dr. Scotland was also so heavily amended, it became like blancmange near the end. All that was left is that calling on the National Assembly to adopt to adopt the recommendations. In fact, on the House, the minister then called for that consider the recommendations. But on the House, in the motion that was sent to the Speaker, it was heavily amended. Not one of the motions that we submitted in the last Parliament came back unamended. Secondly, they took much longer than the time that's normal. Third, next issue is the questions. Questions were also heavily amended by the then Speaker. Sections and chunks were taken out. And so, when it was Mr. Ramkaran, that would happen infrequently, but would happen. But under Dr. Scotland as the Speaker, it happened every time with everything the opposition brought. And I'm not even referring to the innocent, non-partisan motions of mental health and suicide, which were brought, which were also heavily amended, and voted down, defeated. Valda was there, Mrs. Lawrence, oh, she's not in the room, that voted down non-partisan motions to do with suicide prevention, sexual abuse, and mental health. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? So this motion can talk all about the length of time that it takes to come on the order paper. The issue, no, it's not tit for tat. You misunderstand, unfortunately. You haven't got the pop out of what I'm saying. You've misunderstood as usual. But Mr. Speaker, you have a one-track mind. Mr. Speaker, the issue is that this motion does not warrant the support of this side of the House, because to limit any speaker or clerk to 4 days, I think is wrong. It goes against the principles and parliamentary procedures that we allow ourselves, as in all cases, to be subjected to higher authorities to examine what we do. And on the questions brought by members to this House, the volume of questions that have been asked is to your congratulation. This is to your credit. But also, too, the questions have been answered over and over again. Sometimes you may not like the time, and as you know, the rules are not that you can get a question before it comes to the House, the answer. The rules are very clear. The answers are circulated when the House, if you want to change that, bring another motion to amend. But it says very clearly, the answers by the ministers are circulated at the time of the sitting. And so too with the oral questions. As I said in the beginning, the Minister, President, Speaker, and the clerk have been very in allowing questions for oral, which demands so much attention, so much detail, that it probably the minister, when he comes to read it, would take 10, 15 minutes of the time of the House, just reading the number of contractors. And so you mustn't complain. There's been leniency on your part. The clerk has been very lenient. The speaker has been lenient. Certainly much more than what we experienced under Dr. Scotland, the former speaker, and also even under our friend and colleague, Mr. Ramkaran, where we also, as a government were also reprimanded, and also many of our things were also amended to comply with the standing orders. We can't treat the standing orders. Mr. Patterson says, well, the 4 days, and if they can't make the 4 days, well, that's okay. No, I'm sorry, that's not how the standing orders work. If you want to have that, you have to write in your draft motion, the motion you brought, that 4 days or under exceptional circumstances, blah, 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 it could be more. But you can't say 4 days for the clerk and the speaker to respond on the clear, and then say, well, if they can't make it, it's okay, they could take more time. That's not what the standing order says. You can't, have your cake and eat it. You are bringing in amendment to restrict the clerk and the speaker to 4-day limit on examining the questions. That's what you're doing. You are treating the two highest positions in this House as post boxes. We mail it in, they force now to deliver it. That's not how it works. And so unfortunately, I believe that the motion has not been thought out properly. It has not been thought out properly. Unfortunately, when my friend Miss Ferguson speaks about suspension and all her questions had to make, well, it's just like when you do something wrong and you are punished, then you face the consequences. And so in this House, we have to have some discipline. And so if you do something in the Privilege Committee, then at least be humble and recognize that there are consequences. But Mr. Speaker, this motion, I believe, cannot be supported on the grounds I've given, and that the supposition that this is what the British Parliament does, this is what we do, we're not. We were advised by Sir Michael Davies, who was sent to us by the British Parliament and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. And the amendments we came up in 2006, with further amendments of 2011, are done. It was done bipartisan. It was government and opposition. It went unanimously to the House and was passed in the House. That doesn't mean that there can't be amendments. But when you start tinkering with 4 days here and 4 days here, you're not looking at the way in which the whole process works. And so, Mr. Speaker, I understand the opposition needed something to speak about on their day, as they had nothing else, and I congratulate them for finding something. some interest to do so. So we will not support this motion.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Mahikwa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. A very, very simple motion. The only addition to words that orders is 4 days. Only addition. There is no other addition in this motion. The standing order speaks to every other word that is mentioned in this motion. So when I stood earlier, sir, and I merely read the motion, I honestly and sincerely thought that this motion would have enjoyed the support of the government side in this House. And the fundamental reason why I believed the government would have supported this motion is because in due time they will be sitting on this side and they will enjoy the benefit of what this motion is seeking to do. You see, Mr. Speaker, the reason why the government side will enjoy this motion is because the people of Guyana will judge them soon at the elections, and they will be judged for their behavior, especially in the most recent action of wanting to appeal a decision that was made by Judge Sandel Kisoon to benefit all of Guyana. The people of Guyana are watching them, and the people of Guyana knows that the ruling Judge Sandel Kisoon made was to benefit the people of Guyana. So they will be judged. They will be judged. And sometimes we forget what is the fundamental reason of us being elected to this National Assembly. It is not because of who want to determine how busy they are. The people's business comes first. And the questions that we put in the National Assembly and the motions that we bring here, it is not for our personal self. It is to represent the people of Guyana. And the people of Guyana have asked us to ensure that they get timely response to the questions and motions that they have given us that mandate to put forward. And I say again, sir, that this motion is not a motion with any sinister motive at hand. It is simply to put timelines in place. And I say again, sir, that the government side in the near future will benefit because their days over there are numbered. They are numbered. When you look at the substandard work in the Ministry of Public Works, roads that are broken up after months of being constructed, their days are numbered. When you look at the health sector and how the people at West Demerara Hospital are Georgetown Public Hospital, and you look at what is happening there, your days are numbered. When you look at the Foreign Service and you look at the UTOD, who is lost as far as I'm concerned, their Prime Minister and the way in which the Civil Defense Commission deals. When you look at the security sector,
Honorable Member, there's a number, but we're speaking to this motion that want to number my days.
Mr. Speaker, your days very clear. Let me make this very clear, sir. I am speaking to the motion because it's a motion to benefit them, the honorable members on government side, when they come over here sooner rather than later. When you look, sir, at the Honorable Dr. Vindi Prasad and how staff members had to write a letter against. Sir, when you look at the house being allocated where people don't even know where is it that their lots are located, their days are numbered. Sir, when you look at what is happening in all oil money, and we boast about the influx of the money, and it can't be felt by the ordinary people and cost of. The people of Guyana will. So when I call on the government side to support such a motion, it is simply because I know it will benefit. I want to turn my attention to the presentations made by the three honorable members on the government side. Opposite side. Sir, I want to start with my friend. It's very clear. Madame Teixeira has served in this National Assembly of 30 years. And I want to pay her the respect she rightly deserves. And I want to say without a doubt that I do have great respect for the Honorable Gail Teixeira. And I believe the AP and UAFC in totality have great respect for the Honorable Gail Teixeira. And I would not, sir, try to hide the fact that Honorable Pauline Sukai service to that of Honorable Gail Teixeira have made people not recognize that. But for the fact, she does have the same years of service as Honorable Teixeira. That they have served that well. But when you listen to an like what we just heard, particularly me, a young member of parliament, as to where is the substance. Here's, sir, this greatest of respect for, stood in this house and spoke. I have to remind Honorable Moses Nagamutu submitted a no motion in 2013, I think. And instead of that motion being brought to the floor, the parliament was prorogued. But when they, on the opposite side, it was brought to the floor and it was debated. So that ought to be mentioned, sir. Great respect for, went into history and talked about the standing order, and Sir Michael Davies' report never said that and amend standing order 82 that speaks. It seems as though Sir Michael Davies' report used in this honorable house. Standing order 82 was suspended. Include standing order 84, 82, 4. Sir Michael Davies never said that the quorum for PAC must be 2 from government side. Sir Michael Davies saw that the quorum was 9 at that time, and he didn't attempt, Honorable Gail Teixeira, to change the quorum of a public accounts committee. And the public, the people of Guyana, they are seeing what is the happenings right now in the Public Accounts Committee. 13 Public Accounts Committee, the government side, failed to show up, derailing the work of PAC and pushing us 13 weeks beyond to get to the government report. And everybody knows that the reason why we have a Public Accounts Committee is for transparency and accountability, which the government side is running from. Sir, the Honorable Teixeira talked about two sides of their mouth. We have been in here long enough to know who to the Speaker. We agree with that. We don't disagree with that. And the Honorable Teixeira seems to believe that this motion is disagreeing with that. Well, let me remove that doubt from her and assure her that the AP and UAFC, we have the standing member of this House, a long-standing public servant, and he's executing his functions to the best of his ability, to the extent where I know, and many of us on this side know, that many other countries rely on him for guidance, and we respect that about him. Sir, let me turn to the Honorable Sanjeev Dattadin. Sir, I don't know if, you know, when I listened to his statement, I drew the conclusion that he was just dashed on to this motion today. This morning in a matter of minutes, and perhaps he didn't get the time to examine the motion properly. But he attempted to speak about transparency. He attempted to speak, and he spoke about elections and rigging. I said in this House the last, and I'm saying it again, every one of our candidates that are contesting in the local government election, legitimate signatures. The people are alive and well who signed in support of them, and at no time AP and UAFC had to go on national television to apologize to anybody for their dead mother appearing on a signature list. That is what had to happen with the People's Progressive Party. So let us not talk about transparency and accountability. Let us not talk about electoral fraud. Honorable Sanjeev Dattadin, evidence to support electoral fraud is at the feet of the People's Progressive. That same honorable member, Sanjeev Dattadin, spoke about the suspension of MPs because of an incident that involved perhaps he should turn to Honorable Teixeira and Honorable Pauline Sukai, where they can probably remind him that Isahak Basir, God rest the dead, was a member of the People's Progressive Party when he went and moved the mace, when he took away the mace from its rightful position. Perhaps they don't remember. The People's Progressive Party, perhaps they Isahak Basir, who took a glass from his seat and pelted at the Speaker of the National Assembly at that time. And you talk about decorum.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
You talk about...
Honorable Minister Parliamentary Affairs.
Point of order, standing order 14. The honorable member Mr. Speaker,
go ahead.
the honorable member is referring to a person who has passed, and secondly, he was expelled from the House to not be a member of the House after that incident. So he faced the worst consequences. He was expelled by the National Assembly and not allowed to remain a member of the National Assembly. So do not try to make it seem as if there were no consequences.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, I don't recognize that as a point of order.
Thank you for your protection.
Honorable Member, you may continue.
Thank you very much for your protection, Comrade Speaker. Let me repeat that because it may have been lost. Isahak Basir, God rest the dead, as stated in the Hansards of this National Assembly. It is recorded, was a member of the People's Progressive Party when he removed the mace from its seat and took it and gave it to the Honorable, at the time, Honorable Chedi Jagan, who is now dead also, God rest the dead. He was the one, Isahak Basir, who took a glass and hurled it at the Speaker of the National Assembly. Don't come in here, none of you on that side of the house, and tell us about decorum in this house. Don't come over here in this house and try to paint yourself as though you have done no wrong. Don't do that because you have begun it. You set the record. You are the ones who tried to bring down decorum in this honorable house. That are on the desk. History has taught us that it is the People's Progressive Party that has a track record of no respect for law and order, no respect for decorum, no respect for the order of business. So don't come here and try to tell us what is right from what is wrong. You have a dirty past, and it is well documented. So don't come and try to tell us about it. Mr. Speaker, I turn to my friend Alistair Charlie, Honorable. First of all, I want to respect the fact that Comrade Charlie was very articulate. Had no substance, but spoke well. Articulate, pronounced the words correctly, English and verb agreements well. To the PPP side, the opposite side, they should exchange Charlie. Honorable, of course. But I do take note, given that I know his age, he was well schooled under the People's National Congress reform government. So I congratulate you on the way you have articulated your position, but it was of no substance. Clearly you did not understand the motion too, Honorable Charlie. Clearly you did not understand the motion. That is the same honorable member who said that we have to respect the standing order. It must not be taken lightly. It is there to guide us, and it has been there for a long time. He clearly didn't remember when Gail Teixeira stood up, Honorable, of course, and moved to amend the standing orders. So this amendment to this standing order seems to be only beneficial when it applies to the People's Progressive Party. Honorable Ben, do you categorize that as sanctimonious? Because that's a new word you have learned, my dear comrade, in this honorable house. And you have used it very frequently. Is that sanctimonious? And you see, sir, I have to answer these honorable members because I sat here and I heard how they twisted the entire intention of this motion. It was a simple motion brought before this house for support from their side. If there is no ulterior motive, and it simply seeks to provide the people of Guyana timely answers to their questions and to their requests for motions. That is all it seeks to do. Nothing else. And it is because we on this side of the house recognize that our fundamental duty is to the people of Guyana. We agreed and accepted to take a seat in this house to deal with them first as priority. The people of Guyana. There we accepted to deal with as priority. So I say to the honorable members on the opposite side that if you believe that we should not put a timeline to satisfy the people of this country, then you are basically not satisfying your duties and you should simply go. You should simply submit your resignation letter and go. You are all sitting in respective seats in this National Assembly primarily to represent people of Guyana, all the people of Guyana, not your own self-interest to determine when this should come and when that should come, or when that should go and when that should not go. Your priority remains the people of Guyana. So whether you are part-time, half-time, full-time, or no time, you are here for the people of Guyana. The origin, let me say why this motion came up. Mr. Speaker, you know, I really and truly didn't know what was the direction the government was going in, but I did my homework because I anticipated this kind of behavior from the government side. I anticipated them not wanting to come before this house and support this motion. But I had a part of me that believed that we could have found consensus, that we could have found common ground and constructively, as my sister Annette Ferguson put it, constructively act within the best interests of the people of Guyana. When the motion for the approval of the list of entities nominate members to the Ethnic Relations Commission was laid, a couple of days after it reached the order paper. All the motions, as a matter of fact, that the government side submitted to this National Assembly reached the order paper in a matter of days. From the 6th of December 2021, it made the order paper on the 17th of December 2021. The other one, the adoption of the third report of the Standing Committee on Appointments in relation to the appointment of members of the Police Service Commission, another government motion. It was laid on the 17th of December 2021. It reached the order paper on the 29th of December 2021. A motion was submitted for the gas to shore project by the opposition. It was submitted on the 27th of October 2021. It reached the order paper on the 24th of January 2022. So you see where the motion, where it's coming from? A number of other motions that were submitted here by government reached the order paper a matter of days. When you look at the appointment of a commission of inquiry to investigate the unrest at the Lusignan prison, the subsequent deaths of and the injury of several prisoners on the 19th of September 2020, that was an opposition motion that my honorable friend Geeta Chandan Edmonds submitted. It was submitted on the 19th of November 2020, and it reached the order paper on the 14th of December 2020. When you look at the condemnation to the brutal and horrific killing of Joel Henry, Isaiah Henry, and Harish Singh between the period September 6th to 9th, 2020, it was submitted on the 19th of November 2020. It reached the order paper on the 14th of December 2020. There are a number of other motions here, sir, but for the interest of time, I just want to say that there are government motions that reached the order paper in a matter of days, while the opposition motions take a longer period of time. When we look at the location of the Guyana shore-based service, another motion that was submitted, it was submitted on the 5th of March 2021. It reached the order paper on the 7th of April 2021. When you look at this one is the one that I think reached the order paper the fastest. It was a government motion. It was a government motion. Hear it, my comrade Gail Teixeira. Removal of the chairperson from the Public Accounts Committee. That motion was submitted on the 3rd of June 2021, and it reached the order paper the 9th of June 2021. 3 days after it reached the order paper. Comrade Speaker, six days. Now, sir, when you look, well, go ahead and do your job. It doesn't take away from the point. It does not take away from the point, Mr. Ramson. It does not take away from the point. Sir, when you look at the increase in the cost of living for Guyanese, it was submitted on the 29th of April 2022, and it made the order paper on the 14th of June 2022. Sir, and I must say this. You know, this was a testing period for this motion, because I am very well cognizant of the fact that after these motions and questions reach the order paper, there is a statutory timeline that ought to be satisfied before they make the order paper. And I believe questions are 21 days and motions are 12 days, reference to the opposition motions, 12 days. And I must say that I did seek to submit an amendment to cater for that also, and was rightly so guided that because I am dealing with other motions there, other standing orders, it ought to be submitted as a substantial motion. So I put on notice that another motion for amendment will be coming to reduce the days that it takes questions and motions to move from notice paper onto the order paper. And these actions are not things that are of sinister motive, as I made mention before. It is simply to have timely, effective, and efficient responses to questions and issues the ordinary citizens of Guyana have and will like them to be answered. And that is all that it seeks to do. So I don't know why, Comrade Speaker, we went into this entire argument about no confidence motion and Honorable Datidin talking a whole other thing about rigging. They opened the Pandora box. And we have given them reasons to recognize that they should not have. Because the amount of sins that are at the feet of the People's Progressive Party, there is no place or space for any blessings based on your behavior. So don't come talking to us about that. Sir, I need to reiterate the point. That we in this House accepted, and I will end on this note because the people of Guyana must hear this. We accepted, sir, to occupy our seats, to represent the people of Guyana, and to treat them as priority. And that is fundamental in all of this and the action of this motion. That is what is fundamental. I hear people making the point. About being part-time. And I even heard, sir, that you are a part-time speaker. I honestly thought you were full-time. Forgive me, because I know you enjoy the same benefits as a senior minister. So I thought that you had the same similar strong office and perks and all the other likes as they do. But forgive me for that. I'm happy that you clear it up, and I now know that you are part-time also. But we ought to understand that regardless of that, sir, and Sanjeev, that day an honorable member also spoke about what about if it is submitted, if a motion is submitted on Good Friday. I don't know, like the government didn't buy you a smartphone that has internet access. Everything now in this world happens at the snap of a finger. I know that I have sent to you, Comrade Speaker, I vividly remember this. When I submitted the amendment to the single window planning and development bill. And you looked at it, and in a matter of minutes, I think you responded and asked that it be circulated. And that is very good. So technology is before us, whether it's Good Friday or Good Saturday or Good Sunday or Good Monday, doesn't take away from the fact that technology is at our disposal. We have a hybrid parliament where people could be as far as China and still log in and participate. And you are bringing an argument, Honorable Datadin, about Good Friday? We are not there anymore. We have advanced ourselves. And perhaps I should thank Honorable Catherine Hughes when she was responsible for public telecommunication. You opened the door, and your friend Honorable Onej Waldron seems to be continuing in that regard, but her days are numbered. Pay attention to that. So, Comrade Speaker, I close by saying, sir, that the motion is simple. The motion seeks to put a timeline to benefit the people of Guyana, to give us greater relevance in questions and motions that can deal with current day matter, and we are not overtaken by time. Questions don't arise or appear on an order paper after the matter was dealt with. It becomes relevant. And that is why, sir, because of that time frame that we have, I had to attempt last night to submit a motion concerning Justice Sandil Kisoon's ruling and calling on the government side to respect it. And I understand, sir, that you did not allow it, but it is those kinds of hurdles that are within the standing order that caused me to go down the road on the definite matter of urgent public importance. And it was. The people of Guyana know it was a matter of definite urgent public importance. But even though we respect the decision of the chair and the House, the debate in the public will not finish. The debate in the House, in the public, is what is important, and that is what each and every one of them over there will be judged on. Because God forbid, if there is ever an oil spill in this country, then all of you should be placed on an island to stay there forever. And on that basis, Comrade Speaker, I beg to put this motion to the floor, and I hope I have brought some degree of clarity that will see the support of the government side for the passage of this motion, because it acts within the interests of the people of Guyana. And I trust my good friend, Dr. Asha Kisoon, will equally support this motion, because her presence here is not for herself, it is for the people of Guyana. I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member Mr. Mahipal. I did not want to interrupt the passion which you deliver some of that content, but the use of some of the motion did disregard standing orders. Motions coming from committees and by a minister require only 1 day notice, nothing sinister. You did acknowledge in the end that the government has 6 days and opposition 12 days. And then it was your omissions in this entire presentation which is of concern. And while this is just looking at a time frame for the administration of the National Assembly to put questions, you still have to consider 20 content of questions. And I wouldn't bore the House with reading them back again, But content of question, not too lengthy, but very important when we have to read questions and motions against the standing orders. And that is why, in the end, a certain motion on inflation and cost of living took a long time, because in the end, it had to even go back to the legal committee to look at it. Nevertheless, we are here, and I now put the question, the motion submitted by the honorable member, Mr. Mahi Paul, to the vote. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no.
Division.
The noes have it, and there's a division. So we'll ring the bell to ensure, yes, we do have a bell, and again, at the discretion of the chair, we ring the bell so that persons who are not here or persons who may be in China might have the opportunity to log on and participate in the hybrid parliament which we have. But online. Mr. Clerk, you may take the division.
Dr. Kisoon. Dr. Asha Kisoon.
I vote no.
Yes. No. What she said? She against. Mr. Sears,
Yes.
Mr. Sinclair,
Yes.
Miss Alert,
Yes.
Miss Philadelphia, Miss
Yes.
Mr. Jai Prashad,
Yes.
Mistress Flubes,
Yes.
Mr. Rajkumar,
Yes.
Mr. Mahipal,
Yes.
Mr. Figuera,
Yes.
Mr. Cox,
Aye.
Mr. Patterson, Miss Fernandez,
Yes.
Miss Ferguson,
Yes.
Mr. Singh Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Sarabo Ali,
Yes.
Dr. Cummins,
Yes.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Ramsaru,
Yes.
Miss McDonald, Mrs. Walton Desir,
Yes.
Mr. Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mrs. Hastings Williams,
Yes.
Mrs. Lawrence,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan, Mrs. Chandon Edmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Holder,
Yes.
Mr. Ford,
Yes.
Mr. Ramjatan,
Yes.
Mr. Norton,
Yes.
What? How do I
Miss Veerasamy,
unmute?
No.
Mr. Williams,
No.
Dr. Smith,
No.
Mr. Jaffer Ali,
No.
Dr. Westford, Dr. Ramsaran, Mrs. Pearson Fredericks, Mr. Narayan, Mr. Datadin, Dr. Mahadio, Mr. Charlie,
No.
Mr. Siraj, Mr. McCoy, Mr. A. Prasad,
No.
Mr. Indar,
No.
Ms. Rodriguez, Ms. Parag,
No.
Mr. Ramson,
No.
Dr. V. Prasad,
No.
Mr. Kroll,
No.
Mr. Dharamlal,
No.
Mr. Bharat,
No.
Mr. Hamilton,
No.
Ms. Sukai,
No.
Mr. Mustafa,
No.
Ms. Manik Chand, Ms. Manik Chand, Dr. Anthony, Dr. Anthony, Bishop Edgel,
No.
Mr. Todd,
No.
Mr. Shearer,
Sorry. No.
Mr. Nandlal,
No.
Mr. Jagdeo,
No.
Mr. Phillips,
No.
Mr. Speaker, this is Priya. I got cut off the internet. I sent you a message. And I'd like you to acknowledge my message. My vote is no. I was on shortly before, which I dedicated to you, and I asked you to acknowledge that invitation, and then I got kicked off.
Honorable members, we're in a hybrid situation. We have done that for other persons here. Right, her vote could be acknowledged. Honorable.
Mr. Manikchand. Mr. Manikchand?
No. Did you hear that?
Your vote is acknowledged.
Mr. Speaker,
Thank
the
you.
opposition would just like to register their objection to that vote being counted.
Sir, in standing orders, it's very clear.
Honorable members, I now call on the clerk to read the results of the voting.
Mr. Speaker, 31 members voted for the motion, with 34 voting against.
Honorable members, the motion is defeated. This is a good time to take the suspension for lunch.
We are a peaceful people. Struggle is with struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it some